Welcome to another episode of HERsuasion, the art of feminine negotiation. As you know, I'm your host, Cindy Watson, and you guys are really in for a treat today. I am super excited to introduce you to Isaac Betancourt. Welcome, Isaac. It is so great to have you here.
Well, thank you for having me. Good morning.
Yeah, and for those of you who don't know, Isaac is served as a hostage negotiator with the police force in Arlington County in Virginia, where I think he worked for about 23 years. He was one of the first responders to assist during the Pentagon attack in 9/11. And he's also served as a crisis negotiation instructor at Northern Virginia Criminal Justice Training Academy. He's trained well over 800 first responders and dispatchers, including officers from the Pentagon, the CIA, the FBI, and he's attended the FBI School of Hostage Negotiation. So we're super lucky to have Isaac here. I've been in a number of clubhouse rooms with Isaac. He's always got tremendous insights. So we are excited to dig in. So tell me, Isaac, how did you come to be a hostage negotiator? That's not a typical career choice.
Well, that's a really good question, Cindy. So, back in 1996, I'm dating myself here. The police department had some positions opened in the hostage negotiation team, and some members had retired. So, in a romantic, idealistic kind of way, I always wanted to help people as a police officer. You know, that's how I went into the profession. Yeah. So then I started thinking, like, what a great way to actually help people, you know, deal with crisis. And when you're a hostage negotiator, because most people are in crisis when they are, you know, calling the police and they're on a barricade or, you know, want to harm themselves and so forth. So that's what got me interested in it. And with that, there's a process. You actually have to audition, you know, to be a hostage negotiator. So during that audition, I call it an audition because I'm also a trumpet player. So I'm used to going to auditions. Yeah. So you actually need to handle a crisis, somebody in crisis, a role play, but you need to handle somebody in crisis. And, you know, I had no training at the time. So basically from everybody that applies, they choose who has the best tone, the best demeanor, the one that, you know, talks kind of like the best talker, I guess. So that was me at the time. And then from there, I didn't even know I was going to be so passionate about it, to be honest with you. And then after that, after I started learning, I was like, this is really interesting, you know. And then because I like to know how things work, then it transitioned into how people work or behavior or how people react to certain situations.
Yeah. I love that. And I can tell you're passionate about it, your input, and you have that hostage negotiator voice. Like even when things are getting, you know, people are getting excited in the clubhouse room, your input is always so level, right? Just so precise. Now I know you really value, you know, getting clarity on goals is a really important part of negotiation. So I wondered if you could just, you know, speak to us for that a minute. What do you mean by getting clarity? Because I don't know about you, I think it's one of the areas where most people fall down in negotiations. They just don't pay enough attention to getting clarity on their goals. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the most common the problem that I see, and the funny thing is, like, you know, I kind of subconsciously always knew about this, but I really didn't think about it that deeply. Yeah. And it wasn't until recently, I would say probably like a year and a half ago, that I actually started thinking about this. I did it based on my training, but I never thought of it consciously until I started talking to business people about their negotiation skills. Yeah. And a lot of the failures that they described to me was because they said I either got emotional, I got frustrated, I didn't know where to go. I felt like I didn't know enough, or was insecure about my skills, which they all have one thing in common, which is the goal switch from whatever it was, selling your product, obtaining objectives, to making it about me. Emotionally making it about me. Emotionally saying, I am frustrated. I don't know enough. I don't know how to do this. Right there, when you started feeling that way and you change your mindset, you change the goal to make it about you, and you totally forgot about, you deviated from your ultimate goal, which was to sell your product, sell your company, make a profit, establish a better relationship, and so forth. So people were saying, Isaac, why am I failing? And then when I started actually breaking it down in a more simplistic way to them, like, this is what's happening right here. We talk about emotions, we talk about negotiations. A lot of business people think that the word emotions in negotiations is taboo.
Yeah.
We just cannot help feel it. It's natural. It's just come through. And then when that happens, we don't even notice it. It's just automatic. It's natural. And what happens automatically, the goal shifts and goes this way, goes right, or goes left instead of going straight to the goal. And that's when you see the failure, because now you're defending yourself. Now you're defending your value. Now you're defending your point of view. And now it's about you instead of the goal.
Yeah.
So a lot of people ask me, so Isaac, what? I don't get it. So then how can I stay on the goal without making it about me? Because because it happens every single time. To me, it's just second nature that happens every single time, that I don't know how to do anything else. And I say, well, at the point that you are not selling your product or trying to accomplish the ultimate goal, you're failing. You're making it about you.
Yeah.
That's when you know.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. And it's funny because that sounds a lot like ego, right? So I count ego as one of the 7 deadly sins of negotiation. As soon as we come from that place of ego. And it's funny because I think that old, what I call the traditional model of negotiation, where you've got that more competitive model, it's like that zero-sum game, us against them. That ego really showed up, definitely, because it was all about getting your goal and your needs met without really considering the other. And it was one of the things that really prompted me after 30 years in law, where it's that very adversarial practice, to come up with a more collaborative model, where I think when you're more interested in finding out what the other person's needs are, you're going to be much more likely to be able to come to a resolution that's not only better for you, but for them and everybody. So I think that's one element of that sort of ego showing up, where it's that collaborative versus competitive model. But also we have this issue with when people are coming from a place of not really considering what the other person's needs are. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so it's interesting to, hear that competitive versus, collaboration, because to me, in my head, it is so clear. Competition means it's about me.
Yeah.
Collaboration means it's about us.
Yeah.
Right there, to me, in a very simplistic, again, I keep saying that word, it's competitive means it's about you. I'm going to win. Competition means I'm going to win.
Yeah.
Now, if you're in a team and you say, okay, we got to win, what is the ultimate goal? We have to win the case. So the ultimate goal is not about you, it's about winning the case. And then with that come processes that come with that. And I think that's where people get confused. People say, Isaac, but I need to do this in order to do this. And that looks like something that I have to do. And I said, okay, that's part of the process, but what is the ultimate goal? If the ultimate goal is, for example, and this is going to be a very simple, in family dynamics, for example, if your son or your daughter asks you to stay later than their curfew time, at that point, you're making a decision. What's more important to you, the curfew time or the relationship?
Yeah.
At that point, right there, at that second. So you're going to say, no, you're going to stay later than 9 p.m. Or yes, I'm going to allow you to stay till 10 o'clock, but don't ask me again.
Yeah.
So then at that point, you made it. Yeah, at that point, if you made it about the curfew, you made it about the curfew. If you made it about the relationship, you say, okay, I'm going to make a compromise here. And I'm going to allow him to stay, him or her to stay later an hour, because I care about how we're going to interact tomorrow. Because tonight they're going to be mad at me because I don't care. They're going to be mad at me because I want them to be here at 9, not at 10. So at that point, you made a decision. Subconsciously, you made a decision, and you chose what was your goal. Same thing when we are in a business relationship. Are you gonna allow these terms to happen? If not, you're making it about the profit, which is the margin profit, which is the 25% that you want. Now, when you compromise, if you say 15%, are you thinking about the relationship? Are you thinking about future? What is the goal? And the people say, well, it could be either. What's the wrong one? That's the question I get. What's the wrong one? I said, there's no judgment. That's your decision to make. Now, the point is, stay clear on what the goal is. Don't think that you're doing this thinking that you're trying to accomplish the goal when you deviated from the goal that you had in the first place.
Yeah. Well, and I'm so glad you raised the issue of relationship, because again, it's one of those areas I think people miss. Like when I'm talking about teaching people about getting clear about their outcomes, I break it down into sort of three parts. There are process outcomes, or, sort of the means of the negotiation, right? About how do you want the negotiation to play out? Because sometimes that's a negotiation itself, right? I mean, if it's multiple terms, are you going to be signing off as you go? Like, figure out how you want the negotiation to go. What's the process? And being open to the other side, but you should have at least some outcome or idea of the process. And then you've got like the matter, obviously, and that's the part most people consider. Here's what I want, the substance of it, the matter of the negotiations. But I find they often forget the relationship piece of it. And sometimes giving up that short-term that matter is worth it for that long-term relationship, whether business or personally. So I take it from what you've said, you would agree with that, or?
It's funny because, I have some lawyers as clients. And they are like, well, Isaac, I don't like those techniques because that means I have to talk a lot, and or I have to listen. I don't want to listen. I just wanted to do what I wanted to do.
I know.
And I said, that's fine. If your goal is for them to submit to whatever law-abiding contract you have, that is the goal. It's not to establish a relationship. That is the goal. Like I said, there's no judgment, but know that is the goal. For them to submit. And for that, a lot of lawyers that I see, they use that as leverage, and they are as a kind of almost as a bully in a way, because I have this document, you better comply with the terms of it. You signed the agreement, and now it's for you to basically do your part.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you mentioned about lawyers, because I mean, it's, as you know, it's I'm on a mission to help reframe how we practice law, like getting away from the problem with our legal system. It's so adversarial that, even the so-called winners come away feeling like just battled by the process. And I think as lawyers, I think back to law school, we're so trained for that. What we believe to be the goal is win the case, win the argument, dominate the conversation. And it took me a lot of years. I was guilty of it as well, Isaac, I've got to admit. And then finally had, my epiphany and recognized you can actually get better results for you, for your client, for everybody, if you're willing to stop being the person who's talking so much, especially in settlement discussions or negotiations, and really try to sit back, use powerful questions to find out what the other party needs, because often there's a solution there that's better than what you thought was the win that you were going in for in that outcome. So I find it very short-sighted approach. And I think you're right. Lawyers are very guilty of that, of always just going for what they believe to be the win, and also not thinking about the long-term relationships for themselves, with other counsel, with the adjudicators, but especially for our clients, right? Our clients have to go on in most cases and have some sort of relationship. Even when you don't think you do, it's a small world and things come back around. So did you have any stories or examples where you thought that kind of getting clarity around the goals made a difference, either positive or negative?
I think regarding their interpersonal relationships, it got better for them. Regarding their law, if that's the law that they practice and they're used to it, it's hard for people to change that. But then I just thought of a point when you were making your statement, Cindy, is that mediators, that's what they do. Mediators is when we're talking about goals, right? I am one party in a divorce. Let's say I'm a party in a divorce. You are the other party in the divorce. We're not seeing eye to eye here on how to, divide our assets. right? And we're a stalemate here. And the mediator, and my goal is to accomplish my goal. Your goal is to accomplish your goal. And now a mediator comes to try to reshift the goal in another way.
Yeah.
How can we make this work in a way that is happy for both parties or satisfactory for both parties? And all the mediator is doing, and the mediators listening right now are gonna hate me for this, but basically what they're doing is they're reshifting the goal of the negotiation to something that they both can emotionally be adapted to.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that because, if anything, I'd love to have you come in and train some of the mediators out there. Because I got to tell you, after 30 years of practice, obviously we have a lot of third-party mediators who come in the practice of law. And it amazes me how many of those professional mediators will say, I know I've done my job right if everybody walks away unhappy. And I'm like, no, that is not what a really effective negotiation shouldn't be. Everybody walks away unhappy. I mean, that happens sometimes. I'm not naive, but the goal surely should be, let's find creative outside the box solutions, get the parties to be thinking differently so they're not so tunnel vision. So we have the space to find more creative solutions where everybody can walk away feeling a little happier. At least that's my view. I don't know if that's been your experience.
No, that's a great point because, and I'm going to get some pushback here from some mediators, and I apologize in advance. But if you live by that mantra that, that you get the job done when everybody's unhappy, that means, again, going back to the goals, you made it about you, because that's the easy way out.
Yeah.
When people are unhappy, that means that you did not want to really carve that happiness, whatever that looks like, into it, because you just made people compromise to something they didn't want to do in the first place. Yeah. And nobody's denying that the process is hard. It's a hardship. You get burned out. Now, the issue I wanted to make that a follow-up is that when you get burned out, you got to be careful, because now you're making it about you every single time, because you don't want to hear about it. You don't want to spend time on it. So, if you're being successful by making it about you, it's not a judgment, that's fine. But just know that when you're mediating and you're burned out and you're tired of the process, now basically, inevitably, you're making it about you every single time.
Yeah. Yeah. I love this approach that you take, this sort of ego-based, right? I think it's a great checklist that every time you recognize that you're focusing on yourself, stop, take a break, take a pause, and recheck if you're on track for your goals or if you're making it about you, whether it's the mediator or otherwise. So what role do you think preparation plays in negotiation? And in addition, obviously we've talked a lot about getting clear about your goals, which is super important. What else would you suggest some of the most important elements about preparing for a negotiation?
Yeah, so there's so many schools of thought out there regarding, preparing for negotiation that, a lot of people, include gain some intelligence from the other company, what was the profit margin the last quarter? What are we, we're dealing with procurement, are we dealing with actually somebody in the office, are we dealing with somebody who's making the decisions and so forth. So of course, there's some elements that you cannot prepare for every single time. All you can do is prepare for what you have control of, which is yourself.
Yeah.
So at that point, I always say, watch your tone. Watch your tone. Listen. If you are hearing words and you're just constantly thinking, well, what you're gonna say next, you're not listening.
Yeah.
It's a one-sided conversation. So listen to what they have to say. And there's something I call, actually, I started this technique called rapping, which is a lot of people, use common ground to share values. Oh, you play golf, I play golf. Where do you play golf? I play golf in Florida, I play golf in Texas. Have you been to that course? No, I haven't.
Yeah.
And then the conversation lasts for like 10 minutes. Oh, that's great, blah, blah, blah. A brand of golf clubs. And then after that, it's like, okay, so let's talk about, this or that or that. And then it basically, in my opinion, common ground is a dead end every single time.
Yeah.
Even if I, like, for example, I was in the military, and even if I talked to another military person that was in the same branch of military, that was in the same conflict that I was, our experiences are so different.
Yeah.
Now, there's always a dead end. Even if we were in the military together, which is a huge bonding thing for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So what I do is, instead of using common ground as something to gain from or what have you, why not use your values of your company and whatever you have to offer with the values of that person? Now, what does that look like? For example, if you are Cindy, a person that likes to be on time, which I know you are.
Yeah.
I am a person that likes to be on time. Okay, we both, what is it? Okay, so let's play a game, Cindy. So what would be 5 word associations that you would give somebody that's punctual?
5 word associations for somebody that's punctual. Okay.
Yeah.
I would say reliable, conscientious, trustworthy, cooperative, respectful. Those are 5 that jump to mind.
Great values, great values. Now, let's say, for example, your product is a reliable product. A person that's punctual is reliable. Now we can wrap that value. You're punctual, you're reliable. My product is a reliable product. For the last 6 months, we haven't had an issue with our product.
I love this.
Any complaints at all.
Yeah.
That's the common ground that I'm talking about. Wrap your values with the values of that person, the values of what they want, the values of who they are, instead of trying to get common ground on a dog, on kids, on school, disclosing personal information that might be, 50% uncomfortable, because, common ground can go either way. It could go bad, good or bad, because people can make a judgment about you. Oh, really? You have that much time to play golf? Wow. Okay. You're gonna be looking out for my business. Well, when you're playing golf all the time because your handicap is this or that, because you want to keep your handicap, So instead of doing that, let's talk about business, but let's talk about what is that we have in common regarding our business values, about who we are as people.
Yeah, I love that. I've never heard that before. Rapping, that's great.
Well, that was, I have to say, disclaimer, this is Isaac's term. This is Isaac's. So this is something I thought of actually, not too long ago. And the funny thing is, I had a client right before this call, and the client had that issue where, I said, the person says, let me figure things out myself. He was trying to sell a product. And basically, she was dismissing him by saying, let me figure things out. I said, okay, so give me 5 word associations of people that try to figure things out. And that, they're self-reliable, they're analytical, they are reliable, they are, they get things done. And I said, so what are some of the core values that your product has that can match that kind of personality traits? Yeah. And he says, well, yeah, we're reliable. We get things done. I said, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. You got to go get that copyright and patented. That'll be your trademark rapping. I love that. I think that's
actually, you know what? As soon as we get done with this call, I'll do some research. Thank you for
I love that. Yeah, I definitely encourage you to go own that baby. I think that's a great concept. I love that idea about values, because everything else in the industry, everybody talks about rapport building, make that small chit chat. This is a way more valuable way to approach that sort of chatting, right? It's not wasted, frivolous time, and actually ties back in, and it intuitively builds trust. When you're talking about values as opposed to just superficial chit chat, you're subconsciously building that trust with the other side. I love it. Now, what role do you think emotion plays in negotiation, or should it? I know we touched on it a little bit at the beginning, but I'd love if you could go a little deeper, because I've heard you chat about emotion before.
Yeah. So, the interesting thing is that people want to deny that emotions are useless, or that emotions have no place in negotiations and so forth, pretending. And, I want to apologize to people in advance, pretending that emotions are not present in negotiations, that are totally absent, when it's totally the contrary.
Yeah.
If I was going to take your pulse, and I said something to just like, your pulse rate will probably go up, meaning that you might keep the straight face, pretending that it didn't affect you, but of course, and when emotions go up, logic goes down. And the thing is, we go back again to what is your goal. And if you stay focused on the goal, which is I want to sell this product, I want to make a profit, I want my company to succeed, then whatever negative feeling that you're feeling at that point, you got to dismiss it and stay focused on the goal. You know, and I'm going to give you an example how that applies in hostage negotiation. If your family, God forbid, Cindy, is taken hostage, and you are standing right behind me, and you tell me right before I pick up the phone, you're like, I pat me in the back, Isaac, I trust you. You're gonna do a good job for my family. They're gonna come out safe, right? And I said, I cannot promise you, Cindy, but I'll do my best.
Yeah.
And I get on the phone, and the first thing the guy says, I don't like cops. You're a dirty bleep. I don't like your accent. Blah blah blah. Bleep. Get the F, out of my face. See you later. And I said, you know what? I don't need to talk to you, and hung up the phone. And I turn to you and I say, how was that, Cindy? You'll be like, what just happened? I'm like, oh my God, is my family gonna be okay? I mean, get somebody else here. Why? Why? Because I've made it about me.
Yeah.
And the emotions, I got my emotions, a part of it. Okay. Instead of maybe using, instead of saying, well, it sounds like you have a hard time, with the police, but how can we make this work today?
Yeah.
How can we resolve this today?
Yeah. I love that.
Staying focused on the goal. Okay. I feel, I felt offended. I felt offended by it. But what is my goal? My goal is to save lives, not to make it about me. And once I make it about me, and there's some the funny part is that people think that this doesn't happen. There's an infamous YouTube video where there's actually a police officer talking to somebody who a young person who actually wanted to hurt themselves, and the officer actually made it about him to a very sad ending.
Yeah.
And it's been used all over the training, hostage negotiation trainings, as to what not to do because the person made it about them.
Yeah.
So in conclusion, emotions play a big part. It depends. Are you gonna let the emotions control you, especially the negative ones?
Yeah.
The negative ones are the ones that are gonna hurt you.
Yeah.
Or are you gonna stay focused on the goal?
Yeah. And I mean, we all have triggers, right? So, I mean, one of the things going back to when we talked about prep, and you've heard me speak about this before, like I'm a big believer as part of your prep process to really ground yourself in who you want to show up as, right? Like, pick 3 words so that when those triggers come, you can just take that breath, take that moment and reground yourself. Do you want to be calm, collected, and compelling? And again, there's no judgment, no right answer, but be really intentional about who you want to show up as. And Isaac, I love, because almost all of the threads as we're talking keep coming back to that fundamental importance of ego and really being in charge of keeping the ego out of the negotiation and finding other ways about it. And you should write a book about that, because I mean, people talk about ego, but not in such an connected way. Like you sort of weave a tapestry of this that really resonates on all of the different elements of negotiation and how it comes back to that. So I could see a big best-selling book for you about something about ego, right? How to keep ego out of negotiations, or ego, whatever. Think of a snazzier title than that, but I think it's a really important point that you make. And I got to say, I mean, I've been teaching this stuff for years, and you're making me think about it in a little different way. Like, yeah, I talk about this stuff, but I don't know that I weave it through every aspect of it. So important. So what advice do you have for negotiating with bullies or people with more power, or when the negotiation becomes one-sided? What are some tips you would give for that?
Yeah, so those are the people that actually equals like I want to be in control. I want to be in charge. And people like that, the people that have encountered with like that, what actually works is that at that point, again, you stay focused on the goal, but you have to shift your strategy somehow. And what that looks like usually is people that are actually like that, they don't feel safe with you usually.
Yeah.
So they feel and again with word association, how does that look like? A person that doesn't feel safe with you, they don't trust you. they don't believe in your product. They believe that you probably have a hidden agenda. You know, there are people who are cautious. You know, there are people who actually need more information. So when you are actually dealing with people that are like bullies or assertives and so forth like that, in my head, I will be thinking, okay, I want to sell my product. What is it that they need from me for me to be able to accomplish this goal today? Do they need to feel safe? You know, and to do that, do I need to let them talk, express themselves? You know, do I need to just, you know, reaffirm that what they're saying, okay, it's a point, but how does that match my value again? Again, going back to rapping, you know, they're saying, well, you know, the last person that I dealt with, you know, treated me like this, or they sell me a product that was crap, and 30 days later, I had to call them and blah, 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 blah. Okay, so right there. Okay, so if you're gonna wrap your values, that means is your product reliable? Are you gonna be a customer service oriented kind of person and so forth? Well, it sounds like this person has issues with safety. Yeah. Safety is a really important part. So are you providing safety? Can you provide safety? Most likely, yes. And how do you, you know, communicate that to the other side? So I would say, when you're dealing with a bully and so forth, a lot of times we feel powerless because they take a lot of space in the room. They take a lot of, you know, they don't let us talk and so forth like that. And that's when you really have to do a lot of listening, compromising, and also stay focused on the goal and how does my product match their values.
Yeah. Well, and I love that because the listening's come up a few times here, and it was interesting because I know recently in Clubhouse, there was somebody, again, I forget his name at the moment, and he was talking about this concept. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so right. Because I've been talking about it for years. I call it elevated active listening. So, you know, we talk about passive listening and the importance in active listening where you're reflecting back. And I've always called it elevated active listening, where you reflect back to the person, their position, but in a way that's as generous as possible, right? That's just you make their argument better than they made it themselves. And especially if you're dealing with bullies in that, I've always found that a very interesting way. There's almost a physical softening that you see happen. I mean, not always, but often enough that it's such a valuable tool that when you are able to be generous, because everybody wants to be heard. So not only do they then recognize that you're listening to them, but it lets that guard down because they're like, oh, not only does she get it, but she actually just framed that argument in a way that helps my position. And then you see a little bit more opening and room for that receptivity. Would you agree? Has that been your experience, Isaac, or no?
Yeah, no, I like that a lot, Cindy. I definitely agree because, you know, reshaping things in a positive way, I think is always beneficial. Yeah. You know, especially, you know, when you give it back to them in a way that they, you know, that they can understand it better, or in a way that, you know, it's beneficial to both parties. You know, the only issue that I see sometimes is that, again, we go back to emotions. Yeah. And a lot of times people are triggered by bullies, triggered by people that talk a lot. And then when they give it back to them, it almost sounds like an insult. Mm-hmm. You know, it almost sounds like, you know, like, well, and then I say, so what happened? Well, I explained it to them and they didn't get it. And I'm like, okay, so how do you explain it? Well, I told them that, you know, too bad if they didn't like my product, you know, or so forth, that we've been in business for 10 years. And I said, okay, first of all, your tone. Yeah. Okay. And then second of all, you made it about you again, you know, because you wanted to defend your position. You didn't give it back to them. You kind of wanted, you know, and again, we go back to the beginning of the conversation again, that, you know, just be very careful as to, you know, what is your goal? Is your goal to basically feel good about, you know, what you're saying? You know, oh yeah, I got him. Or is your goal to establish collaboration, to sell your product in a way that matches the other person's values? And I know that a lot of people must be thinking, Isaac, that is so easy for you to say. That is so easy for you to say, you know, and I'm going to challenge you there that every single time you see that there's a failure in your negotiation, go back and analyze. Yeah. What was the main motivator? And I guarantee you that 90% of the time is because the goal shifted and you made it about you, or you made it about, you know, some validation that you needed, you know, to make that conversation happen.
Yeah, so valuable, so valuable. I love that. And I do agree. I think that the numbers are staggering. So, and again, I invite everybody out there, take up Isaac's challenge. Go think back to some recent negotiations that you've had where things really didn't go your way, and get ruthlessly honest with yourself and go back and analyze the breakdown and own maybe where your ego was showing up in a way where you shifted away from that collaborative, let's stick to the goal. Let's see if we can focus on the values here, and realize where either you were triggered or the other person was triggered and you didn't bring it back in that way. So I invite you all to take that challenge up. So what are some of the other reasons that you would say that negotiations fail, or the biggest mistakes that you've seen, and when you were training, what are some of the things that you caution people to avoid?
Yeah, so always coming in with a hidden agenda, meaning that and the hidden agenda could be anything, could be hiding information, not being transparent, because what happens is that and this is something that happens all the time, is a lot of times you think that you're hiding things, but they come out to the surface, without you even knowing it, because now, because as humans, we have a conscience, we have emotions and so forth like that. And sooner or later, that information is going to come out, and trust is going to be lost, altogether lost.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we do in hostage negotiation is that you never lie. The reason why is like, if I lie to you in the first hour and we're negotiating for 5 hours, that lie is going to come out at the fourth or 5 hour, fifth hour, and you're gonna call me out on it. You're gonna be, Isaac, didn't you tell me that?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh wow, yeah, I did say that. I totally forgot that I did say that. Why? Because it was not based on any truth, any foundation, and so forth like that. So some of the biggest things is I'm making it about you. I see that it's one of the things that always fails. But but a lot of the clients tell me that the funny thing is, Cindy, a lot of clients tell me that they felt good when they told the other person off, but at the same time they felt bad because they lost.
Yeah. Yeah. Lots of gold nuggets in there as well, because you're so right. Like, I find those unstated needs, like I often describe, negotiation as the iceberg, right? You see the tip, only the 10, 20% or whatever, but that 80% is below the surface. And we always think that's just for the other side, but even for ourselves, right? You've got, as you say, you think you're hiding or suppressing some of these, but they have a way of percolating up. And somebody on the other side, if they're even halfway decent, whether through sort of the power of questions or just that active listening, they're going to get to that. So I love that. What do you think are the key skills that make for a great negotiator?
I think self-aware. The first thing that came to mind was self-aware. Was the first one that came to mind. Yeah. And second, the tone. I think tone is a huge one. Yeah. A lot of people, when we talk about, HERsuasion, and so forth like that, I talk to a lot of female clients that, they feel that this is the way that men want, and this might be controversial, but this is the way that men want them to be in business, and it's almost to sound identical to what they sound like. Yeah. And it's almost, and then when I meet them one-to-one, I'm like, wow, Mary sounds so different than she sounded when she was talking in this group of men. It's like, and this persona takes a lot of energy and so forth. And I want to say that be yourself, that try the best. I know there's a business element out there and so forth like that, but I think a lot of times we associate being ourselves with weakness.
Yes.
And I think that's why we put this persona up, or this wall that comes up and so forth like that. And I think, you can be a great negotiator if you have power behind you and so forth like that. But when it comes to one-on-one, I think it's going to be hard to win, because you always have to put this persona that is not really who you are.
Yeah. Oh, I am so glad. So do not worry about it being controversial, because Isaac, that goes to the heart of why I started HERsuasion and the art of feminine negotiation, because I saw it in law over and over again. I saw it in the corporate world over and over again. And I think it's because for so long, we define success based on that more traditional masculine model. And so women ended up, I think women bought into the myth that, oh, if I'm going to be successful, I need to show up like that. I need to be tougher. I need to come from that competitive place. I need to be seen to be in control. And it takes a lot of energy because, as you say, if that's not authentic to you, one of the most important elements of HERsuasion is come back and trust your natural negotiating style. And some of those traits that maybe you've seen as a weakness or believed were a weakness for so long, they can be your greatest asset if you own them and recognize them and bring that empathy to the table, bring that active listening to the table, bring that collaborative approach to the table and own it and leverage it and use that as your secret weapon rather than showing up pretending to be something that you're not. And ironically, I also, as you probably gathered, I actually think that approach is outdated now. I think it is not the most effective style of negotiating, right? And don't get me wrong, when I did that, as you know, for the many years as a lawyer, I bought into that myth as well. My clients called me the Barracuda, and I got great results, or at least I felt like I got great results. But now I'm kind of embarrassed looking back because now that I've totally switched gears and really gone the sort of art of feminine negotiation, I'm getting even better results with better relationships and better buy-in. And you don't get that resentment. You don't adversely impact on your relationships. And you also can look yourself in the mirror without losing your sense of self. So did you find that? I know when you were doing hostage training as well, what was your experience with that sort of gender issue with men and women? And did you share that advice with them, Isaac?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I can actually recall one specific instance where I had this friend of mine that actually put in for the hostage negotiation team, and she got in. And we had a great relationship, and she was very outgoing person and so forth. And when it came time for her to, the first training and so forth, she got on the phone and she was very dominating, very abrasive and so forth like that. And I said, time out. And I said, okay, so we're friends. I know you. Is this really how you talk? Is this really how you, no. And I said, I know that's what you think that we want of you. No, I want you. Like if you and I were at a bar and you're talking to them, how would you, and then get that cop persona out.
Yeah.
And just be a human being. You're here, they're in there, they're contained, because hostage negotiations, you need containment, right? People, they're contained, they're not gonna hurt you, they're fine. Just go ahead and be yourself. And then when I told her that, it kind of like a light bulb went off, and then she actually, yes, and then she was one of the best negotiators that we had.
Yeah.
Because at that point, it's like, you're more relaxed, right? Because you're being yourself. You're thinking about what is the goal, which is save lives. You're not thinking, because now if you're trying to be somebody else, now you're making it about you again. Now we go full circle. I have to keep this persona, so I have to give this impression. And that's the first goal. And the second goal is to whatever it is that you want to obtain. But the first goal is to keep that persona at all costs.
Yeah.
And that takes a lot of energy. That takes away from the goal.
Yeah.
Which is.
Yeah. Such great advice. And it does, you're right. I mean, people don't think about it, but there is energy when you're putting on a facade, right? It's like the introvert who goes to the party and is acting like an extrovert, right? I mean, maybe that's an easier analogy. I mean, people there is a lot of energy that comes with that. You're more likely to get yourself tripped up. And when you're not being authentic, people feel that and they know that, and they may not even be aware of what it is, but there's something that then causes that resistance in the negotiation, right? So I love it. Well, I can't believe how quickly the time has gone here. We're going to have to make sure to get you back. So I normally end by asking, Isaac, what is one of the greatest mindset shifts that you've had in your life? Doesn't have to be about negotiation. It can be, but about anything. What would be one of the greatest mindset shifts that you think you've had?
I think the biggest one, the first one that comes to mind is believing about myself, believing that I can do it. And how that happened was, and it's kind of almost like a rite of passage. And I used to be in the military, and I used to be in the 82nd Airborne Division. And the first time I had to jump out of that plane, I didn't think I could do it.
Yeah.
I was scared. I was a young guy and so forth like that. And I didn't realize the psychological impact that that would have on me when I stepped out of that door, of the plane. And, when I saw myself falling in the air, before the parachute opened, and when that parachute opened, I felt like, I never thought I could do this ever in my life. I was a little kid from the mountains in Puerto Rico. I never, ever saw myself, doing such a thing like that. And if my mom would to see me, would be like, "Are you, wow, you have come a long way." And then anyway, that laid the foundation to who I am today, which meant, hostage negotiator, somebody that actually can be, confident and actually, because again, what is my goal? What is my intent? And my intent was to save lives, and then you stay true to that goal, to today. And then, I try to apply that to everything in my life nowadays.
I love that. That's beautiful. Yeah. And so important, right? When we have that mindset shift to be able to trust in ourselves, to believe in ourselves. I don't know if you know Jeff Healey. He's a Canadian musician. He was born blind, and, his whole life he was told you can't do it. And he became one of the biggest icons in the music industry. And I ended up writing a book about him because he died too early of cancer at only in his 40s. But he, even at the end, just the most positive, radiant personality, because he didn't take I can't do it as an answer. And he was so inspiring to others around him, and so important in negotiation, because I think the difference between people often confuse assertive with aggressive. So I'll often say assertiveness comes from that confidence that you're talking about, Isaac, and confidence just comes from that knowledge or preparation and that sort of belief in yourself. So great note to end on. I love it. So tell us, how can people learn more about you? Isaac, where do you want to send them if people want to learn more about you and what you do?
So I am very, stealthy right now. So
Okay.
You can send me an email at negotiationmatters@gmail.com. That's the best way to reach me. And then from there, that's how I communicate with my clients. And after that, we move on to my cell phone and so forth. But usually they just email me negotiationmatters@gmail.com. And the funny thing is, Cindy, we talked about Clubhouse. Most of my clients nowadays come from Clubhouse and from word of mouth. So
that's fantastic. Yeah. We'll make sure to put that in the show notes for you, because you got lots of value to share. And thanks so much for being with us here, Isaac. I really appreciate that. And for all of our listeners out there, I'm sure you got loads of value from this episode. So if so, make sure to subscribe, make sure to share certainly this episode with anyone, and make sure to join our Women on Purpose community on Facebook as well at facebook.com/groups, Women on Purpose community. And that's a wrap for this episode. So as always, until next time, go forth and negotiate your best life on your terms so you can stop missing out and start getting more of what you want and deserve in life, from the boardroom to the bedroom.